Hello everybody, welcome to the video for week 3 of the Kombucha Lab. The main thing that you'll do this week for your pre-lab is work on graphing. This is not the only thing that you'll do, but it's the main thing that you'll do. So in addition to learning about graphing and making graphs, you're also going to be learning about the microbes that do the fermentation in kombucha. There's yeast and bacteria. There's several different kinds of yeast and bacteria, but we're not going to learn the individual kinds. We'll just learn the main groups, yeast and bacteria, characteristics of them, and what they do in the fermentation. So you'll read this bit. And then instead of a quiz this week on Moodle, there is something called a lesson. So for the pre-lab, there's a part that you'll do on Moodle and a part that you'll print out, which is kind of normal. But this week's part on Moodle is called a lesson instead of a quiz. It's called a lesson because it combines asking you questions with information parts. So when you start the lesson, it's going to ask you some questions about scientific name and kombucha microbes, because the lesson assumes that you have already read through that material. The lesson is not timed, so you can read it at the exact moment, whatever. But the first questions in the lesson will be about this. Then the lesson will switch to Excel and graphing. And it will offer you the option to watch some videos about Excel before you answer the Excel questions. If you feel really confident in Excel, you can go straight to the Excel questions, but the videos are embedded in the lesson if you need them. This is why it's called a lesson. Okay. So at the end of the lesson, it will tell you to make a graph. So we're going to switch over to Moodle so you guys can see. Okay, so here we are in the Moodle. We're in week 3 because this is week 3 pre-lab this week. This week's Moodle quiz is in the lesson. Here's where you go to do the lesson. Okay, so at the end of the lesson, you're going to make a graph. You're going to make 2 graphs. Three, maybe several super important things that you'll need to know. Thing number 1, you must make the graphs in Excel. Do not use Google Sheets or numbers or whatever. You must use Excel. Number 2, you must use Excel that is installed on a computer. The web Excel does not have all the options that you need. So you must use an installed Excel in order to make the graphs for this week. You will not need to pay for Excel, so it is included for you as part of your tuition. So if you scroll up higher on Moodle, see how it says get Microsoft Office here. You can get Office and install it on up to 5 devices. Your computer, your phone, your tablet, your other computer, whatever. You can install it up to 5 places. The whole Office, Excel, PowerPoint, Word, all of it, as part of your tuition. But you need to use the installed Excel in order to make the graphs for this week and for future weeks. If something goes awry with the installation, or your computer's on the fritz or whatever, then you'll need to go to a computer lab and use the installed Excel that is there. Do be aware that the computer labs wipe the computers overnight, or if you log out, or if you restart them. And so be sure that your stuff is printed out or emailed to yourself or saved on the OneDrive before you leave the computer in the computer lab. Okay, so you'll use the installed Excel somewhere. You'll finish the lesson. At the end of the lesson are the instructions for how to make the graph. If you did not write them down, which makes total sense because you don't necessarily know that they're going to be super important, then you can get them here. Week 3 graph directions. So we're going to open those, and they look like this. And so it will tell you what kind of graphs you're going to make. 2 graphs, first graph here, second graph here, example of graph that you should make. Okay. So then you're going to come back to the Excel, and you will download one of the 4 data sets depending on your last name. You do not get points for graphing the wrong data, so be sure you get the right data set. You're going to make your graphs in Excel, and then you're going to upload your Excel file right here. Must absolutely be called this. If it is called Excel file, no points for you. If it is called Smith Jimmy week 3 pre-lab, but it's a PDF, no points for you. And so it must be called this file name in order for it to even be considered for grading. I realize that you might think that this is persnickety, but when you guys go to apply for future graduate school or jobs or whatever, then the file name and the file type actually are really important parts of your application process. This is part of how they tell who's good at following directions and who's serious about moving forward into future school or into a job. And so that's the way it is in this lab. The file name and the file type that you are supposed to use should always be right with the upload link, and you have to name it this or it won't even be considered for grading and you'll just get a 0. Okay, very important. So you're going to, for your pre-lab, you're going to do the lesson, you're going to download the data set that you need, you're going to make the 2 graphs that are in the graph directions, and then you're going to upload your Excel file. You also are going to print out the graphs and bring them to lab in addition to your answers to these 3 questions. Okay, so you're going to do the lesson, you're going to make the graphs, upload the graphs, print out the graphs, and bring the printed out thing with you to lab along with these 3 questions. So that's your pre-lab for this week. It's kind of a lot, but I'm confident that you guys can do it. And again, we're going to be doing graphing again in the future. So this week is like learning to use Excel. The graphs are a little lighter effort. In the future, you'll have more intense graphs to do. Okay, back to the lab manual. So this week in lab, you will be making kombucha. So you're going to make 2 jars, your control jar, which is the black tea, white sugar jar, and then your experimental 1 jar, which is whatever the one change is that you've decided to make. Change the sugar, change the tea, add a spice, whatever. You're going to make the 2 jars. Okay, so I do not know how often you guys have made tea at your house. So you boil the water, and then you add the sugar. If you're making sweet tea at your house, you boil the water, then you add the sugar because you have to get the sugar dissolved. You don't want grainy sugar at the bottom. So you add the sugar right away to the hot water, and then you add the tea bags, and it will tell you how long to steep them. This is how long you leave the tea bags in the water. If you leave the tea bags in the water too long, then you'll get more bitter chemicals out of the tea leaves, and the tea tastes bad, and also the microbes don't like it. So stick with the steeping time. If you go over or under, then you just write in your lab notebook. Like steeping time was 5 minutes. I did 5 minutes and 27 seconds, whatever. This is fine. Just write it in your notebook. So you'll boil the water. I don't know how often you guys do like cooking type stuff at your house, but water takes a long time to boil. And so as soon as the quiz is over, take yourself, pick up a kettle, get water, plug it into the pink dot outlet, and start the water boiling. Then, like weighing out your sugar and labeling your jars and all the stuff while the water is heating up. Then you're going to put the sugar in the jar, put the tea bags, steep for the allotted amount of time. You'll put the paper towel lid over your jar. This is important because mold from the air can fall in and grow and be really disgusting. So anytime that you have both water and sugar in the jar, you'll need a little piece of paper towel just sitting on top as a lid to exclude the mold, even while the tea is steeping and while the jar is cooling and everything. So after the tea steeping time, you're going to take out your tea bags. Your jar is still going to be really hot. It is too hot to add the starter. You'll just kill the microbes. And so you'll want to make sure that your jars are separated on the table. If they're right next together, it's going to take them longer to cool. And so you're going to have the 2 jars. They're going to be labeled. They'll have the little paper towel lid on top, and they'll be far apart, and you'll be waiting for them to cool. When the jars are cool enough that you can hold them, this is what I call the snuggly hot chocolate temperature. Like, it feels warm and cozy, but it's not burning your hand. That's the temperature where you can add the starter. It's about 50 degrees Celsius, and that's when you can add the starter. After you add the starter and any other ingredients that you have, then you'll add the water up to the bottom of the threads. After that, then you'll need to take the day 0 pH and the day 0 pictures, and then you'll put on your permanent lid, rubber band it, and then put your jar over in your lab groups area. So that's what you're doing in lab this week.